America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Doctors Noa Nessim and Libby Wetterer, third-year family medicine resident physicians and members of the Union Organizing Committee for Residents and Fellows at Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. Also on the program today, Congress to intervene in rail negotiations, probably, but not definitely, on the side of owners versus allowing for 4 to 7 sick days a year. Meanwhile, the Respect for Marriage Act passes the Senate 61 to 36. It will pass in the House and it will be signed by Joe Biden. The Oath Keepers leader, what's it, Rhodes? Convicted of a conspiracy for sedition in federal district court. It's a rare conviction on that charge. Republicans, meanwhile, eyeing the debt ceiling vote as a vehicle for cutting Social Security. U.S. gun deaths rate highest in 3 decades. New York City will now have cops commit people the cops deem to be too mentally ill to be on the streets. The United States pledges $53 million to the Ukrainian electrical grid. And Elon Musk now explicitly allowing COVID misinformation on Twitter. Lastly, this just in, the Democratic caucus votes for Hakeem Jeffries as their minority leader. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Emma's out today. Bradley's with us remotely. People are sick. There's all sorts of, there's a weird bug going around that is not COVID. I don't know if it's RSV, some type of upper respiratory infection, but stay healthy, folks. Drink lots of fluids. We'll be talking to actually 2 doctors, but we're going to be talking about their organizing efforts to unionize in the face of a major healthcare company consolidating, essentially just chasing profits at the expense of both doctors and patients. And we will be talking to them. Meanwhile, in the House today, and then I think subsequently the Senate, it now appears there will be 2 bills that will be voted on. But first, we have a clip of from Meet the Press. This was from yesterday, I believe it was, right? Where which gives you a sense of why there's going to be 2 bills. Initially, there was just going to be a bill which represented the deal hammered out by Labor Secretary Marty Walsh that did not include not only any paid sick days, and people should be very clear about this. It's not just that there are no paid sick days for these railway workers. It is also that if you go on sick leave, even without pay, you are literally one step closer to being fired. I think they allow for like 3 days, and the fourth day you get fired. So it's not just that there's no paid sick days. There really are only a small limited number of sick days before you get fired. Remember, I mean, I know 3 separate people, unrelated, who had COVID over Thanksgiving, whose Thanksgivings were ended because of COVID. I know people who have been bedridden for days. We have one person out right now who's sick. Imagine having only 2 or 3 days a year where if you get a bad cold, day 4, you're fired.
And there's no rationale. It's not about money, as we talked to Jonah yesterday.
I don't think it's about money, but I do think it is like it's about how many people they have to hire. I don't think it's the expense that would cost them to pay the sick days for them. I think they have been cutting workers for years, and they are doing it because this is what puts money in their pockets in terms of stocks. I'm convinced that's what it is. Nevertheless, here is, I guess, maybe the most recent Democrat elected to the House because her results came in late. There may have been 1 or 2 others. This is Representative Mary Peltola. She is the Democratic representative from Alaska. And here she is on Meet the Press. And I think it's because people like her came out with this, why there's going to be 2 bills. I'll explain that in a moment.
Are you planning to support this? How are you planning to vote?
I'm going to be in a lot of communication with union leaders, especially union leaders in Alaska. This, of course, is a very grave concern throughout the nation, including Alaska, with freight being so important to all Americans. But I am very concerned about the fact that the negotiation concluded without really getting where we needed to be in terms of sick leave. I think not having sick leave and not being able to go to a doctor or get care is an untenable situation, especially when we have the flu coming up. We've got an RSV outbreak, and we still have effects of COVID as well. So I just don't think it's right or fair to expect workers to go to work sick as a dog without being able to have a few days to recover.
Congresswoman, it sounds like you are a no vote at this point.
That would be the case at this point, yes.
Okay, and what would get you to yes? And how do you respond to the president and various companies saying, look, this could cause catastrophic damage to the nation's economy?
Well, I think it could also cause a catastrophic damage to the nation's economy if we're expecting a whole sector of employees to go to work sick. And repeatedly, I think making sure that freight workers have their immunity built up and can be a healthy workforce, I think that's critical to the economy as well.
Okay, so that paid sick days has to be addressed before you are willing to get on board with this legislation.
Yes, and it's not just paid sick days, it's the ability to have a sick day without the threat of being fired.
I mean, and I liked her framing here too, because you can come out and you can say that we already, our economy has already suffered because of how skimpy these monopolistic freight railway companies have operated in terms of staffing. And this is there. We have a special status for railway and airlines because of its implications for national security and regarding our economy. And the way to make sure that we are safeguarding the economy is to make sure that they have enough staffing and they have enough healthy workers. And this is the way to ensure that. And that's the way you frame this. Aside from it being absolutely true, it also puts it the onus on the freight companies for jeopardizing our economy. For anybody who's going to vote and not support the ability of workers to have the ability to be sick and to take care of themselves. So right now, the latest is this. They are putting on the floor the bill that represents the deal that Marty Walsh had hammered out, which, again, does not include any opportunity for sick days for people. And in addition, they have now, and I would imagine as a function of representatives like Mary Peltola and other members of the Progressive Caucus, Jayapal has announced that there is some type of parliamentary move or rules or whatever it is that is the specific aspect of it. It's a procedure apparently known as the enrollment correction. They're going to mandate that any House legislation to codify the rail agreement will be accompanied by legislation that addresses the workers' longstanding demand for paid leave. And according to Day and Day, and what that means is if both the enforcement of the tentative agreement, that's the one that Walsh handed out, and the 7 sick days, because they've offered a bill that would allow for 7 paid sick days, pass, then the Senate would have to take them up together. They couldn't just pass the first and not the second and send that to the president. Now, this, of course, is contingent on both bills passing in the House. Now, really, I mean, there's a good chance that both bills won't pass in the House, and that is on the president and on Schumer and Pelosi, and really on the president, because they could have said, take Marty Walsh's deal, add 7 sick days. That's the bill.
Yeah, that's what you get for making us get involved.
That's the bill. Because if the workers decide that they're going to strike, they're going to get at least 7 work days, paid sick days. So the bill is this. One bill, take it or leave it. But now you're given an opportunity for, I don't know, a handful of Democrats to just simply abandon the second bill, and then that's dead, and the first one passes. And the first one's going to pass. Make no mistake about it. You're going to have, I would say, anywhere from like 50 to 150, maybe more Republicans voting for that second bill, because it favors the rail companies. Or at the very least, they're not going to block it. Let's put it that way. They're not going to block the passage of either one of those bills. So not sure when that votes are going to take place. We'll talk about it. Emma will be talking about it more tomorrow. If the bill, if something happens over the course of the show, we will mention it. But this is, there was an opportunity here for Biden to do the right thing, and he didn't. And he blew it.
Train Joe.
And this is a guy, too, who, I guess it was 30 years ago, voted against the bill that would have ended a rail strike at that time.
One of few to do that.
Yep. And I think there was 7 in the Senate, if I remember correctly. And there's really no reason whatsoever they couldn't have imposed this. Really no reason at all. All right, we got a sponsor on for today's show, Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station. They've done so for the Mars rover, and now they're bringing their precision engineering to your shaving experience. I'm not exactly sure I know the whole story behind this in terms of like why, but my guess is they have the precision machines that can create a piece of metal or aluminum, I imagine, and do it so precisely. Why not? And one of the things that, when I stopped shaving on a regular basis because of my beard, that I was looking for was a way to not have disposable razors, to not have to have a subscription, to have one of those things, make it simple and easy. And bingo bango, these guys show up. It really is super cool. And I should also say that Kyle texted me the other day, and he's like, I got one, and it's really amazing. It's very simple. This is very simple. It's like this. You drop in disposable razor blades that come in these type of things. You can get 100 of these for $5 a year, not even. So you're talking about, once you buy this razor, it is $5 a year. That's it. That's your ongoing expenses. It is a beautiful piece, really. I mean, that has been precision crafted, like I say. And according to them, razor blades are like diving boards. And the discomfort that you get when shaving with disposable razors is due to the blade extending too far from like where it's held, like a diving board. And that causes the blade to wobble ever so slightly. It's not so much that a bad shave is a blade problem. It turns out it's an extension problem, and that's where they're using aerospace grade computer, they call them CNC machines. Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches. I have no way of measuring that, as far as I know. But it is basically the thickness of a human hair. That means that a secure and stable blade with vibration-free shaving, and it's going to give you the best shave. Plus, this razor has built-in channels that get rid of all the extra hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. So there's no more scraping hair out of your razor with your thumb, which is not a safe thing to do, or banging it on the, that's what I used to do sometimes back in the day. I would bang it right on the sink. Henson Shaving wants you to have the best razor, or I should say they want to be the best razor, but not the best razor business. So in other words, that means you buy it once and you're done. There's no plastic. There's no subscriptions. There's no proprietary blades. There's no planned obsolescence. You buy this Henson razor once. It works with standard dual edge blades. It gives you that old school straight razor shave with the benefits of this new school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's, like I say, about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. They're giving my audience a 2-year supply of blades free. So it's going to cost you $0 after you buy this razor for 2 years. Just go to hensonshaving.com, all one word, HENSON, shaving.com/majority. That's hensonshaving.com/majority. Add a razor and a 100 pack of blades to your cart, then enter the code majority to get the blades for free. The link is in the description. This also makes a great gift. Great gift for somebody who shaves. So check it out. We're going to take a quick break. We'll put that link, of course, in our YouTube and podcast description. Quick break, and we'll be right back with Doctors Noa Nessim and Libby Wetterer, third-year family medicine resident physicians and members of the union that's organizing, or I should say the union organizing committee for residents and fellows at Montefiore Medical Center here in New York City. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining us, Dr. Noa Nessim and Dr. Libby Wetterer. They are third-year family medicine resident physicians. They are members of the Union Organizing Committee, the Committee of Interns and Residents, and Fellows, I should say, at Montefiore Medical Center. Doctors, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So, Noa, let's start with you. Tell us, just give us a sense of of Montefiore's, who this company is, how long they've been up in they're known most for working in the Bronx, which, for folks who don't live in New York, is I think probably the least wealthy borough in New York City, or at least has many folks who are more underserved than, at least in terms of medicine, for the most part, than in any other part of the city. And Montefiore's been there for a while. Tell us about this company and what's changed over the years too with them.
I can do my best. So Montefiore's was established in 1912, pretty sure. And they've been a part of the Bronx for a very long time. The patient population has often, and for historically speaking, been a lot of Medicaid patients, people who have Medicaid. And more recently, Montefiore has been showing its cards a little bit more in terms of its financial priorities. And we're seeing that, Montefiore currently is responsible for about 42% of hospital beds in the Bronx, which, as you mentioned, is one of the most violently deprioritized boroughs in New York City, and one could say one of the most violently deprioritized counties in the country. And given that, Montefiore has a huge responsibility to its patient population. And in, I think, 1950, they established the first Department of Social Medicine, which is a kind of medicine that seeks to serve the whole patient and have an awareness of a patient's social context. Both Dr. Wetterer and I are residents training within the Department of Family and Social Medicine. So it has a mission. It has a mission to serve members of the Bronx, and it has a mission to essentially limit health disparities. But what we're seeing more recently, which is what I can speak to more than the history, is that Montefiore is actively divesting resources from the Bronx and investing resources in whiter, wealthier communities throughout New York City, where a higher percentage of their patients would be private insurance patients, and Monty would therefore make more money off of that healthcare. The biggest example, of course, is the consolidation of primary care clinics in the Bronx, which we can talk about now or a little bit later, but that has been one of the largest examples of Monty deprioritizing healthcare in the Bronx.
All right, I want to get to that point too, because this is a trend that we see throughout the country, frankly, in terms of a consolidation and an attempt to sort of wring as much profits as possible out of healthcare. Dr. Wetterer, let me ask you this: in terms of the organizing history, my understanding is that there's been attempts that go back as far as 20 some odd years ago to organize at Montefiore, but it is most recently sort of had a resurgence during COVID. And we should also say that statistically speaking, we had a lot of people die in those first couple of weeks of COVID when it really hit in New York. And disproportionately, folks in places like the Bronx, or literally the Bronx, lower income people, because they're having less access to medical care in many instances. There were other factors as well, but just give us a little bit of history about the organizing and what it was, what happened with the pandemic, which sort of reignited this understanding that there needs to be some type of protection for people working at the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Nessim and I started in July of 2020. So we were not there for the times in which things were most dire, but I would still say that the the healthcare that we see today is being affected by COVID. So there have been many attempts to unionize, or not many, there had been a few attempts to unionize before us, never as far as we've gotten now, first in the 70s and then in the early 2000s, as you mentioned. This current motion to unionize did start around both the COVID pandemic and also George Floyd's murder. And I think those two events helped to bring a large group of residents together who wanted to make a change in the way we were delivering healthcare in the Bronx. So around early 2020, even before Dr. Nessim and I were residents, we were meeting with other residents and fellows at Montefiore, talking about ideas for having a new push for unionization. Then over the course of the last 2 or so years, we've gotten a larger group of residents in conjunction with nurses who are organizing together to say that we need to deliver healthcare in a different way. I think the healthcare system has been strapped for many years before COVID, but COVID squeezed the healthcare system in a way that we've never seen before. And then somehow, even when COVID surges retreat, we're still being squeezed to that same level. Because in the end, healthcare, even when it's a nonprofit hospital such as Montefiore, is looking for profit. And when they see that their workers can do more with less, they will keep pushing for that.
Right.
What we're seeing is lack of quality care, lack of access to care, but that's less about the driving force for Montefiore. So over the last few years, between COVID and staffing shortages, and also the medical racism that we see both in interpersonal reactions, but also in the way that the Bronx, as Dr. Nessim was mentioning, is closing clinics, has allowed us to organize large groups of residents and fellows to come together and say we want a different moral compass behind this healthcare system that we have here. So I think when we can get something that's a non-capitalistic morale or morals that's behind what's driving Montefiore, it'll be really helpful. So we already have NISNA, who is an incredible, that's the group of nurses that is unionized in New York. They're an incredible moral compass for the healthcare system in New York. But to then get residents and fellows to join with them would be an insurmountable amount of pressure on Montefiore to make decisions not about the bottom line, but about patient care.
Dr. Nessim, is there any other? Because I think we've talked to nurses and unions across the country on this program. I think people are well aware of the California Nurse Association is a very powerful group, but there's analogs all across the country. Are there other unions of interns and fellows? I mean, are there other doctor unions around the country? Would this be the first? And how many people are we talking about at Montefiore? But I guess those are two questions, but take it as you will.
Great. Yeah. So good question. Yes, is the short answer. There absolutely are other physician unions. CIR, the Committee of Interns and Residents, is the predominant union that organizes resident physicians and fellow physicians who are still in training. And they have a union that represents many thousands of training physicians throughout the country. And we've seen actually in the past year alone, over 2,000 new members of CIR have joined because new hospitals have formed unions. There are also unions of attending physicians who are physicians who have completed their training, but we're not really related to those unions as much. And I couldn't answer in more detail about their unions. But yeah, so this would not be the first, but this would be a pretty huge boon to the labor movement among physicians and among training physicians. There are approximately 1,200 interns, residents, and fellows at Montefiore.
And I would imagine that's got to be one of the biggest group of those type of people in the country, right? I mean, I don't know where else you would get that type of density. So, Dr. Wetterer, give me a sense of like what the working conditions are. So I mean, because this is you mentioned that under this intense period during COVID, the number of patients that you probably had to see went up by, I don't know, you'll tell us what percentage. And of course, this is a classic situation with capitalists. They see that they can get this level of productivity out of their workers, even if it's in the context of an emergency. They just presume there's no reason to believe that can't be maintained throughout 365 days out of the year, and both devaluing the work that was done during the emergency and then devaluing the work that would go on a day-to-day basis. But give us a sense of what kind of, how much work are you guys doing, and how much, what is it that you're looking for ultimately if you're able to establish a union?
I think there's two things at play here. One is the COVID epidemic, which has squeezed people tighter. But two is the fact that the way we do residency training in this country is a system of exploitation. So even before COVID, residents have worked extremely hard. So for the most part, residents work about 80 hours per week. Sometimes people break these hours, but there is a national standard that residents cannot work more than 80 hours a week. But if we think about it, that's an incredible amount of work, and most residents are being paid living standards that are difficult to get by on in major cities. So especially for residents who may be parents or may be supporting family, can be very difficult both financially and time-wise to live an adult life. Many people have been in school for over 10 years. There are residency programs that go on as many as 7 years, and then for fellowship. So it's an extended period of time in which you're putting a large strain on your body, on your mental health, as well as on your extended social structure. So that's one factor. And then the second factor is, yes, we are doing more work in COVID. While I can't speak to exactly the percentages that have changed in terms of patient ratios after COVID, I can say that even just covering the amount of hours on the floor has increased, because not only do patients get COVID, but residents also get COVID. And when a resident gets COVID or a fellow gets COVID, another resident or fellow has to cover for them. And when they do that, it just squeezes the smaller labor pool even more, which leads to increased burnout in residency and increased mental health problems, and honestly, probably increased sickness as well. So it's this never-ending system where we just keep getting squeezed and squeezed, and there's no other source of labor that's coming in to help. So it's really tough. Residency is a system in which, like, you kind of just have to keep working because we all need it for our next steps in our careers. So it's
can I just ask you, like, I've always wondered this just in general. Well, what's the theory behind this? I mean, I don't want, like we have limits on how many hours you can drive a tractor trailer for a period of time, because people get tired and they're driving a huge truck, and you don't want them to be overly exhausted. And if you don't put those limits, their bosses or their whatever job they're working are going to put demands on them that they're going to feel like they have to meet to maintain their job. Why in the world do I want my doctor to come in and check me out? I'm sick in the hospital, and they've been awake for 14 hours or 16 hours. They've been working for 16 hours rather. I mean, or 20 hours. I mean, why would I? What's the theory behind that?
I don't know. Go ahead now.
Well, I was just going to say, Sam, you as the patient, you don't want that. There's no reason in the world why you would want that. It's a terrible system for delivery of quality healthcare. The people who want that are the people who are making the decisions about how our healthcare gets delivered, which are our bosses, healthcare executives, healthcare systems, higher ups that we don't even know the half of how much power they hold over us. But this is a widespread problem throughout the country, that this is how doctors get trained. And you're absolutely right. We do 24 to 26 hour shifts at the longest. And oftentimes that comes with not a single break for eating, not a nap, not anything. So
that's crazy.
It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Like, I don't like you folks are the last people I want to be working 24 to 36 hours in a row. Like, I mean, it's just crazy to me. And we can also see this same sort of like theory applied in terms of outlets. And you were going to talk about the consolidation that's been taking place up in the Bronx, shutting, various places where people are getting medical care. Talk about that, because that seems to be an extension of this, right? I mean, like it both feeds into the same staffing issues and sort of scarcity in terms of medical care, but it also has the same sort of like, I guess, MO, which is we will squeeze every bit that we can out of this, and really at the expense of both the providers and the patients. Walk us through what's happened in terms of that consolidation, Dr. Nessim.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. So there are two clinics that the family medicine program or the Department of Family Medicine at Montefiore functions out of. One is the Family Health Center in the Fordham Plaza area, and one is Williamsbridge. And there was an internal medicine and pediatrics primary care clinic a couple blocks away from the Family Health Center, or FHC, in the Fordham area. And all of these three primary care clinics are run by Monty. And Monty decided, without input from patients from any of these clinics, without input from any of the staff who work at any of these clinics, they decided to shut down two of these clinics. Essentially, they shut down the Grand Concourse Clinic, which is the internal medicine pediatrics clinic, not too far from FHC, which is where I am right now. And they moved all of the patients and all of the providers from that clinic into the Family Health Center. What that meant was the majority of providers and patients who were previously working and getting their care at FHC were squeezed into Williamsbridge, the other family medicine clinic. This has left thousands of patients without a primary care provider, as you might imagine. That other clinic, Williamsbridge, is like 2 miles away. It would take 2 buses to get between the two clinics. And you might ask, why would they do this? And the reason is because they hired McKinsey consultants, and McKinsey told them that by saving several hundreds of millions of dollars on this lease for the Grand Concourse Clinic, that would be a good financial decision for them to make.
We just had 2 investigative reporters from the Times on to talk about McKinsey Consulting and the long list of their of this type of work that they do, which is fundamentally just about that bottom line, with a total disregard for the implications of, again, the services that are provided. This is also, we should also say, like, we're not talking about a stereo store here. This is not like, this is not, we're not, this is and I just want to be clear for people who don't live in New York, 2 miles is an extraordinary distance to travel in New York City. It will take you, maybe an hour at least to travel 2 hours, depending on what time of day it is and how many buses you've got to get. And so that means that, people have got to decide between work or getting some type of health care. How are they going to pay for, deal with child care in those instances as well? And I would imagine a lot of patients are elderly and just don't have the mobility.
Beyond that, there's just less visits for patients. So even if they decide to stay at the same clinic, there's like 44,000 less patient visits a year, which is crazy because there's such a need for primary care and healthcare in the Bronx. So even if they say, oh, they can go to the other clinic, oh, we're providing this shuttle, there's still less visits for patients. And at the same time, they're opening up another clinic in Hudson Yards for a completely different population. So there's,
and we should be clear, I just, so the people who are not from New York, Hudson Yards is like now become sort of a Tony part of New York City. I think Trump did some redevelopment down there, and it's all part of the I can't remember what the walkway is, the elevated walkway into there. I mean, it is a very sort of like gentrified area of the city that has become sort of a more expensive part of town. And let me say, Dr. Wetterer, let me ask you this question. A lot of the patients are Medicaid patients, right? And if you're denying 44,000 patient visits a year, that means there are people who are not getting the sort of like the general care that they need to stay healthy. And 80% of healthcare costs are borne by 20% of the people. If you're cutting back on 44,000 patient visits a year, inevitably, there are going to be people who are going to get sicker than they otherwise would have. And that's when it starts costing more. And so this is also like a question of taxpayer, there's a taxpayer sort of like skin in the game here in the sense that we're going to be paying for acute care for acute situations that could have been avoided if folks had access to their sort of like general wellness care, I guess you would call it, over the course of any given year. Give us a sense of like what happens now in terms of your organizing and what folks who are not doctors or interns or nurses or what we can do to help.
Yeah, so this clinic closure is something that we have as a part of our union platform. We also want better staffing. We want better paid parental leave. We have all these asks, but they all have to come after we get a union. So we have formed a group of people. We've formed a union, but it hasn't been recognized by Montefiore. So we came forward to Montefiore, brought everything public and said, we have majority support from our residents. Will you recognize this union voluntarily? They said no. We then asked them, if we move forward for an election, will you play fair? We know that Montefiore, like other big institutions, don't want their workers to unionize because they don't want their workers to have power. When asked if they would play fair, they didn't respond to us. When we made a petition and publicly brought it forth, Dr. Nessim was there in person saying, we would like you to publicly recognize our union or at least say that you're going to play fair when we go to election. They didn't respond as well, said that they wanted it by certified mail, even though there were people in front of them with a signed petition. So now we're deciding as a base the best way to move forward. One might say, why haven't you already filed? Go file with the NLRB. But the thing that we know is that Monty is not saying they will play fair. And we know that they're already garnering legal support to figure out ways to poke holes in our campaign. So we have to decide what's the best way to move forward. We're close to that decision and we will have some updates soon, but it will be tricky from here because we know that Montefiore will do everything that they can to stop us from getting the union that we deserve.
And so what can folks who are either in New York, in the Bronx, or just around the country, what can they do to help your case? I would imagine at the very least, and this may sound a little bit old-timey, letters to the editors, a not-for-profit in particular, I would imagine, feels community pressure somewhat more so, and particularly since they've been here for over 100 years, they're going to feel that community pressure more than maybe a hospital whose holding company is in Texas, for instance. And so, what is it? Those type of things that can help? Just pressuring around the community.
I mean, we would love to give Montefiore the opportunity to do the right thing and to recognize our union right now. So we've had different elected officials in the Bronx, from AOC to beyond the Bronx to Bernie Sanders, saying, hey, Montefiore, please recognize their union. So having groups, elected officials make public statements is very helpful. They could directly write a letter to our CEO of Montefiore, Dr. Ozuah, and say, what are you doing? We heard about this on the news. Please recognize their union. Anything is helpful. And we're putting as much pressure on as we can. And we're actually talking about our next steps of escalation. And as those next steps of escalation come, we can definitely reach out about ways that you can support us as well.
All right, great. Well, Bradley will get that name of the head of the hospital, and we will post it in the YouTube and the podcast description and on the majority.fm folks just send a brief letter, be polite about it. But just say, do the right thing, essentially. Recognize the union. Don't make a big fight. That's going to be very ugly, and it's going to look really bad for the hospital, and it's contrary to their stated mission, I'm sure. Dr. Nessim, Dr. Wetterer, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We will keep our ears open, and hopefully, hopefully your next steps will just be to thank the hospital for recognizing the union. But in the event that that's not the case, we'll be back in touch.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, thank you. All right, folks. Oh yeah, what are we gonna do? We're gonna head to the fun half, or let's do. Do we have an update? Does anybody have an update on the vote? Has that taken place yet? And we will put more information where you can help. I mean, drop a postcard in the mail. It'll take you 5 minutes to write that thing. And I will tell you this, that I have to believe that they have a similar perspective as they do in Congress, which is if they get a written letter, the assumption is going to be that it's from a lot more people. Now, if you have the ability to send it from New York, it's even better. But, if they get a sense that it's somehow on the national news, you don't have to say that you heard it on like a little podcast. You can say, I heard it on the news, which is good because then it makes them start to feel a little bit more pressure. As of yet, we're not seeing anything about a vote on the rail strike. But let's look at how CNN has been covering this a little bit. There's some reactions from CNN correspondents and anchors that are covering the rail strike. And again, none of the people that you're going to hear from in this compilation have probably ever worked a job where they don't get paid sick leave or even sick leave. Just want to be clear on that. There's no sick leave, not just not paid. If they take more than 3 days off because they're sick in a year, they get fired.
I've heard that CNN also gives employees memberships to the gym. What's the really expensive gym here in New York?
Crunch? I don't know.
I forgot what it is. It's one like Ricky Gervais goes to. But if you're CNN, you get to go to. I
bet you there's a lot of wellness. I got to be honest. I haven't belonged to a gym in forever-ish, somewhere around there. But here is a compilation of CNN covering this. Just get a sense of of what they're up for.
A rail strike is one of the most disruptive and expensive things that can happen to an economy.
A rail shutdown or strike would disrupt supply chains.
A strike means food prices could skyrocket.
Many experts are saying would be an economic catastrophe.
That could mean a big shortage and massive price hikes. Even gas prices could increase.
And it also could cost the economy $1 billion within the first week.
That would cripple the economy.
I'm not setting aside the concerns of your members, but are you and your members willing to stop the rails, in effect, and accept those costs to the U.S. economy?
Do you believe a strike is worth it if it cripples the U.S. economy and costs up to $2 billion a day?
More than $2 billion per day.
Is it worth it?
And on top of all of that, the holidays are right around the corner.
It's a little less than a month right before Christmas here.
Especially right before the holidays.
President Biden warning, if that happened, it would devastate the economy if we had a strike like that. So joining me now to talk about this and a lot more is Bank of America. It's Brian Moynihan, Chairman and CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world.
I mean, that's amazing.
It's the stinking woke media.
They're so woke, these guys. I mean, just to give you a sense of the different ways you could frame this, right? I mean, well, first off, in many respects, shouldn't they also be blaming the entire country? Like everybody who's not working for the railways? Like, why aren't you working for the railways?
I mean, did they react this way to when the Fed raises interest rates?
Right. No, of course not. I mean, the idea that this is being framed is if the strike, as opposed to I mean, you can just imagine this way, another way you can frame it. Is denying workers a couple of days of sick leave worth $2 billion a day?
Right. And then if Biden just said that, this entire calculus would be changed.
I mean, it seems... I don't think it would. I think you would still get pushback, but it would immediately, if Biden had come out and reframed this in that way. I mean, Bernie Sanders is doing it, but if Biden had come out and said, "Look, the economy is too important. Never mind, if it's not enough to simply say, like, hey, don't you think, hey, Jack, don't you think that we should have 4 days of sick leave or 7 days of sick leave for workers?" Or, never mind just, again, paid sick leave, like they should be able to be sick. We should allow human beings to be sick and not punish them for that. You could also just frame it in we can't have these huge monopolies that are making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in profit, record-breaking profits, are going to sacrifice the economy because they don't want to pay for their workers when they're sick.
Imagine that question on CNN to a railroad executive.
Or even the Bank of America CEO. Yeah. I mean, it really is nuts. But that's where we're at. And contact your congressperson right now. Do we have a phone number? Bradley, can you grab me a phone number for the general switchboard for Congress? Call right now, ask for your congressperson, and say, I want you to vote for the paid sick leave for railway workers.
The Capitol switchboard is 202-224-3121.
That's 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Just call, very quick call. Ask for your congressperson. Hi, just want to make sure that you're voting in favor of paid sick leave for the railway workers. That's all you got to say. There's absolutely no reason why. And there's going to be a half a dozen or a dozen, maybe 30 Democrats. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how many of them will vote against that bill. Because again, if they can vote for the deal for the president and vote for the paid sick leave, and that ends up as one package in the Senate. That ends up being an up or down vote on both of on those provisions. It gets fused, is my understanding, anyways. And so it's a big deal.
I'm not sure where Rubio's at, but yesterday John Cornyn squawked about supporting paid leave for rail workers. Today he's saying, I just think it's a bad idea for Congress to try to intervene and renegotiate these contracts. So he's no longer a Republican who might help us out on this. So that was just, it looked like it never was going to happen.
This morning, I was listening to, as I do every morning, some of the AP News, and they had a quote from McCarthy, and he came on and he goes, I can't believe this. That he was against this vote. And I thought oh, geez, is he really going to come out in favor of the workers? And it was, no, instead it makes it look like there's a really bad economy. It's just so nonsensical.
They can't do it. We might all the folks who think we might get a realignment somehow. Here's their chance.
No, that was a big movement 10 years ago. Rayhan, I can't remember his name, and there was another guy. They were trying to. Rayhan Salam, I think it was, and there was one other guy.
National Review guys.
Yes, and they were trying to sort of have a working class Republican, and that went nowhere. And then it just became, instead of really working class, let's just make it the working class aesthetic.
Yeah.
Instead of actual material
Which is what Joe Biden does, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member. Join themajorityreport.com. Join themajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only help the show survive and thrive, but you also get the free half free of commercials, and you get the fun half. Shout out to the folks at AIC Lasers. They wanted us just to thank our audience. A lot of folks have been picking up presents for other people, or maybe themselves. I don't know, with their laser woodworking, and that is great gifts. It's all just now is like it's almost relentless. My kids, they get stuck on one thing, and then they just ask. And it's like every 15 minutes, they ask the same question over and over again. And I'm like, I don't have a different answer than I had 15 minutes ago for you. You get the astronaut when you get the astronaut. That's when you get it. And then Mila started to save money, and she's putting it through her bank account. And she asked me every 15 minutes, like, what's the total? I'm like, it's exactly like what it was 15 minutes ago. It's not.
She doesn't. Checking your bank accounts on phone as a kid that's wild.
She can't access it because it's under the auspices of my accounts.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not giving her a login to my account because God knows she's going to start transferring money over.
In other news, we're doing weekend shows because we need to start bringing in some revenue.
Exactly. But they sent us a nice letter saying that they had gotten good responses, and people are really enjoying those gifts. So wanted to mention that. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out ESVN. Tomorrow will be the overtime show, and apparently things are happening in sports, from what I understand.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff going on in the sporting world. And folks, tell your friends about it. We have a decent percentage of people who watch the Majority Report are into sports. But then there's also a ton of other folks, who know people who are into sports. Turn them on to the show. They can go to youtube.com/ESVN, right? Is that it? ESVN show. And check that out. You can find clips there. You can find past shows. You can tell people to call in. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leck Media Enterprise?
Yeah, last night, David Griscom and I, we bitched about this railroad stuff, and also talked to Sam Goodman of La Ruta del Clima to talk about his being at COP, and how the loss and damage sort of victories were won over there. Basically, like nobody was expecting, like, particularly the fund for loss and damage, climate-related loss and damage for the global south to be passed. Even John Kerry said it's not going to happen, and then
last minute,
all the folks representing smaller countries were passing around a photo of John Kerry basically asleep, and be like, "Well, we got it at the end." So under the nose of America, and who else might have wanted to stop us from doing it?
Yeah, I still can't figure out how that happened.
It's very strange, and and the context. We talked a little bit about the human rights context, because there's this Fatah who is on hunger strike
in Egypt.
Yeah, he's currently still alive and taking water. But like, you said like the vibes were very bad at COP. Like, given everyone was concerned about that, and his sister was there, and there was a standoff between UN security and Egyptian security who was trying to harass her. Yeah, it's wild. But yeah, apparently some things were accomplished there.
We spoke to someone from Ruta del Clima last year, I think it was,
after
COP.
Yep.
646-257-3920 is the number if you want to be a part of this program. Folks, you should check out the app. It's free, majorityapp.com. And when you're on the app, make sure you hit the menu bar up in the corner. You can sign up for the AM Quickie. Basically, not quite one click, but almost one click. As close to one click as you can get, and it not being one click. But also you can find merch there. If you want to gift the show to anybody, you can find that there. Meantime, see you in the fun half. 646-257-3920.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha male